So we were discussing the 28th sutra, which says the repetition of this Om and meditating on its meaning is the way. Tad japah tadartha bhavanam. So now what is the meaning of Om and why repetition? These are the two questions. First, repetition of Om or the mantra. Om represents all the mantras. As Sri Ramakrishna used to often say, the entire Vedas, if you put it in a nutshell, is represented by the Gayatri mantra. So all the mantras, elaborate mantras, if you just want to practice and to know what the essence of Vedas are, then they say the Gayatri mantra gives in essence the entire content of the Vedas in a very, very subtle form, a form which you can help you to get that transcendental experience, which is the goal of Vedas. Vedas themselves say, Tatra means when you get to the gist of the Vedas, when you get the essence of the Vedas, then you don't need the Vedas. That's the only scripture in the world, according to Swamiji. Swamiji says it's perhaps the only scripture in the world which says that you have to go beyond the scripture. Tatra Veda Aveda Bhavati. Means when you reach that state, as you go on purifying your chitta, your mind, by reading the Vedas, that is the only thing which Vedas can do. All the rituals, all the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda, all the Upanishads that we study, we do it just, it does serve a purpose. And the purpose is that by doing that, you actually work out your karma. There are two ways of working out your karma. First, doing yama and niyama, according to Patanjali. So if you do yama and niyama, you'd go on doing good continuously without bothering about the result. Then what exactly happens is that you negate the negative karma and the chitta becomes shuddha, chitta shuddhi. So the indirect benefit of reading stotras, doing rituals, doing pujas properly, so they have their importance in spiritual life, but it is an indirect way of uh, helping a person realize his spiritual potential. The real essence is, as Gayatri says, Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayata. The essence of all the mantras, including Om. So that's why Thakur said the essence of all the Vedas, when the mind has become perfectly pure, the chittas, all the old samskaras have been destroyed. And how to do it is been explained here. The repetition of Om and meditating on its meaning. Because Patanjali does not believe in Bija mantras, and because tantras are not part of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. So all these other things added to Om made it easier for the different systems were devised much later. So Vaishnavas repeat the name of Krishna, the Shakti worshippers use the name of Devi, whichever Devi they worship, which is their Ishta. So there are different traditions, but all merge into Om. So all the Gayatri, the essence of Vedas, which is Gayatri, finally merges into Om. So that's why Patanjali goes to the directly to the source, and he says, according to them, because they don't believe in a Ishvara, though they believe in Ishvara in a different way. They do not believe in incarnations, nor they believe in Ishvara as the Puranas believe. They have a different concept of Ishvara, which we discussed. Ishvara Pranidhanatva. Many people mistakenly think that Ishvara Pranidhana means surrendering, becoming a devotee of a personal God. No, that is not what Patanjali has meant. Though we can use it if we follow the Bhakti tradition and the Tantra tradition. We either worship Vishnu or Shiva or Devi. All these things are added. But Patanjali says Om is enough, repetition of Om. And because that Tasya Vachaka Pranava, Tasya means the Ishwarasya Vachaka Pranava. Ishvara of Sankhya or Ishvara of Patanjali's yoga is totally different. That you have to keep in mind. when we use in Bengali or any other Indian language, we say Ishwarer Ichha. That means a personal God, either Krishna, Rama, or any other incarnation, or even if we believe in a deity like Ganesha, Shiva, they are considered to be manifestations of Ishvara in the Puranic sense. But here Ishvara means one who doesn't have a past, present, and future. I mean, who is timeless and is also all knowing. He does not have limited knowledge, he has infinite knowledge. So that is the Ishvara of Sankhya, and that Ishvara is represented by Om. So if we want to do Ishvara Pranidhana, worship Ishvara in the right way, then repetition of Om and meditating on its meaning, that is very important. So why should we meditate on the meaning? Can we not just repeat Om? The same argument is given in Bhakti Yoga also. When you say, what happens if we just repeat the mantra with a bija? The bija is powerful enough to, to show us the meaning, or maybe to enlighten us as to the real meaning of the mantra. That is true, but it will require a lot of time. Continuous repetition in a mechanical way perhaps will give rise to some intuition. But why wait? If you know the meaning, if by the grace of the Guru, the meaning of the mantra is known to you, or as in this case, the meaning of Om is known to you, then why not do the repetition with meditation on its meaning? So if both are done together, first repetition, it has its own, Swamiji says, it is a question of vibration. Now he first discusses this theory of vibration because he was dealing with scientific people in England and also in America, where they will not accept the other theories, but at least they know the theory of molecular vibration. That's why Swamiji says, what do you mean by samskaras? Now it is such a difficult thing. Chitta, what is chitta shuddhi? Why should we do chitta shuddhi? What do sanskaras do? How do they affect our personality? How do they create our karma? All these things, it is so difficult if you want to give the technical explanation of all these things. So Swamiji gives a very, very simplistic explanation. Though it is simplistic explanation, it is definitely a explanation which satisfies the requirements of the highest scientific minds. That was his intention. His audience in the West, especially for whom he wrote this Raj Yoga, were people of the West who had no belief in all this. First of all, they did not believe in rebirth. Then what is this chitta, all introducing strange terms, they would get confused. But he says, first of all, he asks, why should there be repetition? Why not repeat once, and if you know the meaning, will it not reveal, like secular knowledge? If you want to study mathematics, you work hard. Once the meaning is revealed to you, then you don't study it. You just don't keep on repeating it because your purpose has been served. You have understood that concept. You go to the next concept. So unlike secular knowledge, here Om, even if you know the meaning once or somebody explains to you the meaning, still you have to repeat. What is the reason? Swami Vivekananda is trying to explain to us why repetition is necessary by giving a theory of vibrations. In fact, if you read the Vedanta issue of of March and April, which will be continued in May and June, which will be out soon, we have Swami Ashokananda's article on vibrations in two parts. You should read that article because it is just a explanation of what Swamiji says here. He is trying to explain what do vibrations do in our life. Don't think only the physical vibrations are the only vibrations. There are mental vibrations, there are subtle vibrations, there are thought vibrations. Thoughts are also vibrations. So what do these vibrations do? And Om is also a vibration. Om is a sound. Om is definitely tasya vachaka pranava. Pranava means Om. So Ishvara, the whole truth, the whole existence, the whole knowledge is condensed, as it were, in A, U and Ma. I explained to you that. I will not repeat what it means. So A, U and Ma together, and then the silence that follows, represent the three states. To put it briefly, A starts with the waking state, U starts with the dream, U represents the dream, and Ma represents the deep sleep. So U and Ma. So you are passing through these three stages. Every human being is passing through these three stages every day in his life or every moment in his life. Either you are awake or you are dreaming, either in sleep or in daydreaming also can happen. You are awake, but your mind is somewhere else, then it is as good as dreaming. You are creating an imaginary world. You are trying to imagine things which are either happened in the past or in the future. You are not living in the present. Then you can't say that I am awake. I may be awake physically, but mentally I am daydreaming. So whether it is daydreaming or real dreaming at night, it is the same thing. So it is known as Jagrat, Swapna. U is the representative. When you start the whole universe goes, vibrates in cycles. That is what Swamiji tried to establish, the cyclical theory. Karma is also cycle. You start, you are born as a child, you grow, and then you die, and then again you are born as a child. So everything, all the planets, all the motion of everything, electrons, and you see everything is as it were going in cycle. They don't go in a straight line. There is no motion in a straight line. Swamiji has made it very clear. So if you see, everywhere there is a cyclical motion going on. So, so also our karma theory, everything rebirth, everything is explained by that. That is the reason why they say you go cyclically. Say you are awake now, then you go to dream state, then you go to deep sleep, and then suddenly you awake at midnight. So this cycle is constantly going on, and they are the result of this. They are represented, not the result. They are represented in essence, all the sum total of all jivas, which is Ishvara, that Ishvara is represented by Om. When you say it is represented by a sound symbol, which is the sum total of all the sound symbols. Swamiji explained. This is, I'm repeating this because this is difficult, very important to understand this sutra. So I'll repeat what I discussed. When you say it is a waking state, U is the dream state, and Ma is the deep sleep. And then there is a silence. Om is always followed by a silence, and that is known as Turiya. So when there is, according to these uh, grammarians or those who believe in the Sphota theory, they believe that the whole universe started from Om. So Bible also says the same thing. In the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. That means Ishvara himself manifests as this universe, and then when the cycle is over, he will withdraw everything into himself. Then that U and Ma, each one of these alphabets, they are permitted. If you have permutations and combinations of the sound which comes from the throat, U which comes from where you don't, the sound has gone up, and Ma when you need lips. If you see pa, fa, ba, ba, ma, all the other alphabets in whichever language you utter them, either one or two or three or more, or not more, one or two or three areas of this mouth are involved. Without that, you can't make any sound. Say, for example, you want to say ma. Ma involves the two lips. Now, which are the others which involves two lips? Pa, fa. When you utter this, you have to close the lips. Otherwise, that sound will not come. So the entire sound reproduction, all the alphabets and all the words and all the phrases, all the sentences, which is known as nama. And every nama is associated with a rupa. Now in English language, you may say cat, and in other language, you may call marjara, like in Sanskrit. But each name is corresponds to one particular form. So all the names and all the forms, that is the logic they use. Why Om is the symbol of Brahman, or Om is the symbol of Ishvara, Tasya Vachaka Pranava. The reason is because all the permutations and combinations somehow come out of this Om. You can't, this covers the entire pronunciation of all the words in different permutations and combinations. So all the Nama is based on U, and Ma, combinations of U and Ma in different ways. And that gives the rise to different forms. So every name has a form associated. And Nama and Rupa together become Maya, or uh, the whole Prakriti as we see. Now, what does this Om do? When we do Om, why should there be repetition? If we say once Om, is it not enough? No, Swamiji gives a very beautiful explanation. He says, we have to remember here the theory of samskaras, the sum total of impressions which live in the chitta, in the mind. Now, again, you have to recapitulate. This is very important. When we say mind in Vedanta, it does not mean just the brain. It has four parts. First, the manas, the most rudimentary part of the mind, which is the reactive mind. So it is very simple mind, which animals also have, and to some extent, Jagdish Chandra Bose showed, even plants have. They also react to external stimuli. When there is sun, they will react in a particular way. They will do all the processes. So that is also a kind of mind, a subtle. All the organs, they have a mind of their own, though it may not be as advanced as animal minds, and human beings have a higher mind. Why our minds are higher? Because apart from the reactive mind which we share with the animals, which is just a reaction, you see a fire, you just remove your finger from there because you know it burns. But how do you know it burns? When a child first goes near a fire, he will just put his finger. First time when it burns, or if he has a memory of the past life, then he may not go and touch. He may have that fear. You see these lions and tigers and all, the moment they see fires, even the little cubs, they start running away. How can you explain that? They know that this fire burns, though the fire may be very far off. But some children, they don't have this samskara, so they will go and touch. But once their finger burns, they know this is not a pleasant thing, then it becomes a samskara. So that is how Swamiji explains that whatever action you do, it creates a samskara. And the sum total of all the samskaras, where will they be stored? They are stored in another part of the mind, not the manas, in the reactive part of the mind known as chitta. So mana, chitta. Then what are the other two parts? Another is ahankara, or ego. That feeling that I should do this or I should not do this. Who gives the child that idea? The child is born with a very, very raw ego. Then slowly it starts growing. And then the ego, because there are so many stimuluses and so many responses, and the world teaches him, oh, you should do this, you should not do this. Then it goes on adding to its stimulus response, adding his samskaras are formed, and that samskaras, to make him act in a particular way, an ego is required. So ego is the third part of the mind, and the fourth is buddhi. Now this buddhi is something which is the most refined part of the mind, even above the chitta. So whatever be the samskaras, the buddhi tells, the samskaras are telling you don't touch the fire. Now if your buddhi is strong, then you don't touch it. But if your reactive mind is strong, say for example, fire is not a good example, say one sweet meat, you are having diabetes, you should not eat it. The reactive mind, as soon as it sees, the animal instinct is you just pick up the sweet and eat it. But the buddhi will say that, you know, last time you ate, you had this problem. So a samskara was created based on past experience, that every time you eat a sweet, your sugar levels go up. So you just tell, nothing doing, I'm not going to eat it. You use your willpower. Now the will also comes from this buddhi. The stronger the buddhi, the stronger the will. So that's why willpower, in Western psychology, will, emotion and all, they think they place on the same level. But no, according to Indian psychology, emotions and cognition, that anybody can have, even animals have, but willpower, only a refined will, a will to decide whether to do or not to do, or to keep quiet. This will is known as buddhi. So will is supposed to be far superior than just emotions and uh, uh, perceptions. You get the perceptions. You may see thousands of temptations, but if the will does not attach to that, if the buddhi does not attach to that, buddhi does not give permission. Buddhi is like the boss. So buddhi tells the mind, you may see anything which is in front of you, you see, there's no problem, but you are not going to eat it. So that higher refined capacity is the finest vibration. So Swamiji says the sum total of all the impressions which are in the chitta, they are controlled by this buddhi. They become latent. You have experienced it long ago, that by touching the fire, your hands will burn. But even after 20 years, you know that every time you see a fire, you don't have to be reminded. Your buddhi tells you, don't put your finger. That memory is latent. So as soon as they get the stimulus, as soon as the lion sees the fire or the tiger sees the fire, something instinctive tells them that you have to run. That's why they just say when some wild animals attack you, just show them fire and they run. Even if it is a small fire, they know it has a capacity to burn them. So this is the result of samskaras. So Swamiji says, what the microcosm does, like atoms do, we do in a much bigger scale. Atoms also do that. Every atom is full of vibrations. If it vibrates in a particular way, it is one element. If it vibrates in another way, it is a solid. If it vibrates, we know from molecular theory. So Swamiji says, similarly, our chittas are also like that. They are full of molecular vibrations. So what repetition of Om does is, it creates positive vibrations, the mantra. So it is not just faith. Faith is necessary, devotion is necessary, meaning also is necessary. But even if you do it mechanically, the vibrations that are created, at least partially, it will give you some impulses, and the samskaras will be. That's why Holy Mother said, Japat Siddhi, Japat Siddhi. She didn't confuse people by saying you should understand the meaning. Many young, many innocent, uneducated women used to come to Holy Mother and ask, see, somebody says that you should know the meaning of the mantra. So she used to just console them. He said, don't worry, just do japa. Because even if you do mechanically, the vibrations will change, and that is how the old samskaras will be neutralized. So Swamiji says the vibrations of the chitta, though they subside, they are there. The molecular vibrations go on, and when they get the impulse, they come out. To prevent that, we have to do japa. So we can now understand what is meant by repetition. So mantra japat siddhi means repetition of japa leads to siddhi. How? By destroying the samskaras. So then he says the greatest stimulus can be given to spiritual samskaras. So the higher the mental thought, that's why they say one moment of company with the holy makes a ship to cross this ocean of life. Such is the power of association. So it is very clear, when you go to a hot place, everybody in the vicinity gets that warmth. So also the spiritual vibrations, if they are very strong, that is the idea behind the tirthas. So if you can't get a place full of spiritual vibrations, here they say just repeat Om. Such is the power of the Om, repetition of Om, that it is like keeping good company in your own mind. Study and then meditate on what you have studied. The light will come unto you and the self will become manifest. But one must think of Om. First, having repeated, even mechanically, if you get a chance, think of the Om and its meaning too. And then he says, it's not enough if we just repeat the mantra, but you have to prevent yourself by avoiding evil company. Because they say the scars of the old wound of the evil company are still there. They may have subsided because now you are no longer in evil company. That is why when Latu Maharaj, whenever he used to come to meet Thakur, he used to take a particular route. And he came from a very poor background. So naturally his parents, and he doesn't even remember his parents, he was like an orphan. So when he came, he was brought up in an area which was full of drunkards, a poor place in Chhapra. So, and then somehow he was rescued and he came in the company of Ramchandra Datta, who employed him as a servant, and then Thakur, by Thakur's grace, he was allowed to serve Thakur. And then Thakur knew that his old samskaras of this passing through an area where a lot of drunkards are there might ignite the old samskaras. Thakur was so careful that he said, don't come by that route. Even if it is a long route, you avoid coming. He used to tell Latu Maharaj. And of course, Latu Maharaj was very obedient. So he never took that route, because Thakur knew that even though he had started his training under Sri Ramakrishna, but still the old tendencies can harm you. That is why Swamiji says, on one side keep good company, on the other side avoid evil company. So both are necessary. So the good impressions, and then repeat Om when you are not in good company, or even if you are in good company, when you repeat the mantra, when you are left to yourself, then the old associations, the samskaras, they will all tend to come to the surface. So sometimes when people repeat japa, they say we get restless. All the impossible thoughts which we never thought were there in our mind, they come up. So Thakur said, yes, it is true, because the good impressions will come, but along with that, a little bad impressions also might come. But the more you repeat Om, only the good will come. Now, 29th verse, a very small meaning is given. Tataha pratyak chetana adhigama api antaraya abhavascha. Now, what happens when you repeat this mantra? First of all, you repeat this mantra, chitta becomes pure. But there is another very important task which the repetition of Om performs. From that, means tataha, by repetition of the mantra, is gained the knowledge of introspection. You become more thoughtful. You don't surrender to your reactive mind, manas. Your buddhi becomes sharper and sharper as you go on repeating. That is known as knowledge of introspection. Pratyak chetana. Pratyak chetana means that buddhi, when it is bright, when it shines bright, then your discriminative capacity also increases. You know what to do, what not to do. And then what happens because of that? All the obstacles, antaraya abhavasya. Antaraya means obstacles. So we have many obstacles which are self-created or created by somebody else. There are two types of obstacles. One is created by society around us. We are fighting with that. But sometimes some of the obstacles are created by ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly. So the destruction of those obstacles, it is not that we use Om just to destroy, but automatically when your introspection increases, these obstacles slowly go away. They won't vanish in a day. Swamiji says it will manifest slowly, more and more, and then you will find it's not only the interior that is changed, the circumstances changes around you. This is one thing which is very important, that change always is subjective. When you change the subject, the object changes. We are vainly trying to change our circumstances, and it is so difficult. They used to tell that story of a emperor, a very foolish emperor, who thought that if I cover the whole forest, a thorny forest, with leather, then you can easily walk barefoot. But then somebody told him, instead of that, why don't you just wear a chappal yourself? How can you cover the whole forest? How much money is required? So we think of changing the world and making our circumstances better, and changing the circumstances around us so that we can lead a happy life. But if you do subjective change, all the obstacles are indirectly removed. How they are removed, that will be explained now. First, he says the first manifestation of the repetition and thinking of Om or the mantra is that the introspective power will manifest more and more. Your buddhi will be sharp. Then you will avoid unnecessarily, you will avoid bondage, you will avoid doing things which will make you sad later, and you will be very wise. You will not be carried away by your reactive mind and then do all sorts of absurd things and then repent later. Then second thing is, this is very important. Swamiji says all mental and physical obstacles will begin to vanish. Now people are in a hurry. They say as soon as we repeat the mantras, all our problems, especially the gross problems, should be solved. So mental problems will be solved first. When you start with the subtle, the problems is first you get the capacity to bear. External things will take a lot of time to change because they have become gross, they have become full of tamas. So the sattva first changes, then rajas changes, rajasic things changes. You will become more calm, collected, peaceful. But to change the people around you, the hard facts of life, to change the objects around you, to change the behavior of others around you, that will take time. So as the introspective power increases, the physical and mental, the mental first and then the physical obstacles will begin to vanish. What are the obstacles to the yogi? Now before that, I would like to discuss this further, how these obstacles are removed. So Swami Vivekananda once said, manifest the divinity within and you will find everything will be harmoniously arranged around it. Now, how can we get faith from this? We are so impatient that, see, I have been doing japa for such a long time, but still the situation around me is not changing. Why is it so? So all these things, it is very difficult to understand. So that is why Swami Vivekananda says it happens. But to have that, you should have faith in the power of the word. Now, obstacles are removed when? First, when you repeat. Second, when first he says due to repetition, you will your introspection will increase, your buddhi will increase. So you will stop making more and more mistakes. If you are making 100 mistakes every day, because of japa, your introspection will increase and you will make 50. Maybe little more japa, you will make 25. So first of all, the load of problems or the troubles which you have to deal with will decrease. That is one way. And the second thing that happens is the mental and physical obstacles uh, will 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 slowly reduce. He doesn't say it will vanish, they will reduce. Now this will come only through practical experience. Now if you just by saying that Om will do it, and unless we do it, unless we try it in our life, that is why Holy Mother once said, the easiest and the best way to solve all the problems of life, not just one, all, whether they are gross, subtle, or at the causal level. We do not know how it works, but we have to believe in Holy Mother. If we believe in Holy Mother, she says, is to take the name of Sri Ram Krishna in silence. Of course, she said Sri Ram Krishna because the person whom she was addressing was initiated in that holy mantra. And even otherwise, they say this mantra was given by Thakur himself. So along with Om, there is this bija and the name of Thakur. So it makes it very powerful. So now we should appreciate, first start with the appreciation of the word of either Om or the whole mantra in spiritual life. Now that will come only through practical experience. People who have never tried the practice of repeating the name of God will scoff at it. They will say, oh, it is just mechanical. What will happen? Instead of that, I would rather use my time and energy to solve the problem. How foolish to imagine that just by japa these problems. But they are not able to solve the problems because they are mechanical. And moreover, they feel, what is the fun in repeating the same word over and over again? Is repetition necessary? Can we not have different things? Today, for example, there are people, they try one mantra, then they try Shiva, then somebody said Saraswati mantra is good. Sometimes we get mails like that. We went to this particular ashram, they said it is powerful, but then we heard from this ashram that this is very powerful. That is not the way to practice. It is like digging so many wells in different places. So that is why Patanjali comes down, makes it very simple, saying just don't bother about traditions, go back to Om. But even if you choose a bigger mantra, you have to repeat it, and in repetition is the power. So just repeating the same word over and over again, such people who don't have faith, They are in a hurry to solve their problems through spirituality. So they go and try so many things. And then they will criticize that, oh, your spiritual training or these methods don't work. Then they give up spirituality for good. So if that faith is not there, and if we don't practice it, that is why Raja Maharaj once told a very disturbed brahmachari who was saying, I'm practicing regularly, but I'm not getting any peace of mind. There's no change. I'm as where I was a few years ago, I'm there only. Then Raja Maharaj asked him, how many times do you repeat? He said, repeat 20,000 times per day, and then if nothing happens, just do it for 1 or 2 years. And if nothing happens, then come and you can slap me. So he went to the extent of saying, first try. You just do a few mantras and then few repetitions and then want things to change overnight. That is not possible. So we have to logically think that have we practiced? How much effort we put in to earn a little money, and so much of brain energy. Business people, they try to use their whole day and night, they are constantly thinking on ways and means to earn money. If that attention or that yearning is there for repetition, then if the results don't come, then we can say that this method doesn't work, but we don't do it. So most of us spend a very small proportion of our waking hours. So other than that, if we see the other part of our life, other than spiritual practices, are we doing something which is creative, which is conducive to this spiritual practice which we do for a few hours? So what we are in a kind of mental fog, to put it. It's a hazy type of living which we disconnected sense impressions, taking up one thing, throwing it, taking up another thing, just fiddling around. And with that kind of mind, you cannot possibly uh, get a kind of result. So that's why so Swamiji here says it's not just repetition. You have to put your whole heart and soul into the repetition of the mantra. Otherwise, all these disconnected sense impressions, irrelevant memories of unnecessary things which do not concern us. If we really see the time we use every day, how much of it is really connected to our self-improvement? Most of the time, we will be either busy with our television, news, and so many things. We can't avoid. There's so much of bombardment of ideas and things which really don't concern us. It really doesn't matter what happens. It may look selfish that, oh, you are not connected to the world, you don't keep abreast, but can I make a difference? If it deals with my profession or the work I am doing, then it is welcome. You have to get expertise in that and do well. Do it as karma yoga. But there are certain things which have remotely not in any way connected to our, and then this curiosity, trying to find out what is going on, which has no bearing upon our lives. So all these irrelevant memories we are collecting, and it is like a garbage bin. So all the fears, resentments, we hear other stories. So that's why Holy Mother used to say that don't even sit where negative things are discussed, because you may think it is happening to somebody else. We are discussing about somebody else. It's a gossip. What is there? After all, these things are not applicable to me. But Mother says, no, you will be affected. A small portion of your mind will absorb those things, and they will become silently go and become samskaras. And when you are in a similar situation, those things will come and disturb you. So all these fears, resentments, discomfort, excitement, and all those things which we get from daily, if we see at any moment, Swamiji says, if we take say 20 human beings and try to dissect their minds and inspect the workings of their mind, then you will find only one or two who just mind their own business. it is not a exaggeration to say this, because most of our are minding businesses other than our own. If we stick to our the task at hand, because as Jesus said in the Bible, sufficient unto the day the evil thereof. We are having our own problems, and on top of that we try to mix it, get involved in things which do not concern us, increase our the samskaras in our mind, some samskaras which have no relevance to directly to our life, and innocently allow them to creep in our minds, and that chitta, that disturbed chitta, and with that disturbed chitta we try to sharpen our buddhi and try to meditate. Naturally we will be thinking of all those things. So that is how our minds are there. So that is why Swamiji says the repetition prevents this. If we just add slowly in all the activities this repetition of God. Okay, we are sometimes tired of doing japa. Try to think of God in a different way. Try to feel His presence. Try to think about His glories. That is why all these ancillary sadhanas are introduced. When you get fatigued by doing japa, which you obviously cannot do for long hours, then you can resort to Leela Chintan, thinking about the glories of the Lord. Anyway, the mind is wandering. Then you take up some of the incidents of Sri Ramakrishna's life. That is why these classes have some kind of importance. When we discuss the gospel, we discuss certain good things. At least it is preventing the bad things, the negative things, things which drag us down from being cluttered in our mind. So, despite all the interference of the outside world, we somehow, if we make a practice of repeating this mantra or om in our mind, then our anxieties will become less and less. So there is only one way, according to Patanjali, there is only one way to keep holy company is to repeat om or the mantra, which, so the name of God or om will change the climate of our mind subjectively, and progressively they will change the situation outside. But we are in a hurry always to see the result. Oh, I have done so much of japa. People are so calculative. When they start some business, they invest a lot of money and they don't mind waiting for 20, 30 years to really start making profit. If you ask them, they'll say, oh, that is how business runs. We have put in money, but that is how the society, there are so many ups and downs in the market. Oh, then they keep on hoping that one day their business will thrive. So they're so much patient trying to see the effects of their simple secular things. But when it comes to spirituality, they don't have that much patience to see the result and first do it and then see if it really does it really change our, definitely it changes our internal personality, but does it change the things outside? Or even if it doesn't change, does it allow us to make ourselves strong, that the influence of the external forces, the external conditions, the external circumstances, they can't disturb our peace of mind? So that for that we have to repeat the name over and over again. So if we can't do that, once we have the company of the holy word, that is om, that it becomes automatic. It becomes some kind of stable base where you can rest when you are tired. You otherwise you will find that you will be running helter skelter. If this problem comes, you solve it, go to another problem comes, you solve it, then you don't know when will it end. Will this circus end somewhere? For that you want something where you can, which you can use as a shock absorber. That is what they say. So repetition creates a space in the mind, in the chitta, some deep samskaras, which by constant repetition become the dominant samskara of our mind. So all the little samskaras which appear to be so dangerous and so troublesome, the samskara of fear, the samskara of getting insulted, excited and getting upset, angry. So these are all small samskaras. They can be easily dealt with if there it can be replaced by a very strong samskara which you have to patiently create by repeating Om. So whatever happens, this Om or this Ishta, or whether you worship Om as Ishvara or whether you worship the Ishta with the mantra, it becomes more easy if you worship God as a person. Because our tendency when there is any panic, we can't just go to an empty photograph and say that you please help me. We want a living person. So that is why even today the need for a guru or need for somebody whom we can run to, because we have not developed that connection. But once you develop that connection, then you don't run to people around you. For small things we may run, but when it comes to greater problems, where even other human beings around us, they will say, oh, they will just sympathize, give some lip service, okay, it is just manage it, somehow it will go away. More than that, what can they do? So at that time, this repetition of the Om or the mantra, it comes in very handy. So, but as I said, we have to meditate upon the name. It will give its own, has its own molecular vibration benefit, as Swamiji pointed out. It is not sufficient. That is why the repetition of the word Om and meditating on its meaning. So, if we persevere in this, trying to first follow the first part of the advice, that is repetition, and then it will inevitably lead to a stage where the moment you repeat, you go into some kind of meditation, some kind of stability, some kind of presence. You may not always visualize it. Some people find it very difficult to visualize when they close their eyes. They want to see the photograph. So mother says, okay, if you can't, meditate with your eyes open. Seeing God with eyes open. There's a beautiful book. There he shows methods and techniques where people are so gross that unless they open, unless they see Thakur, or unless they uh, get some concrete form in front of them, they can't meditate. The moment they close their eyes, some people can meditate on the sound of the mantra. That is very prominent in their mind, but then the picture vanishes. Both will not be there. So Nama and Rupa, these are to be handled together. If you have Nama, you'll get half benefit. That is why they say to remove the whole Maya, you should have Nama and Rupa. So meditation, repetition of the name, and meditating on its meaning, that is Rupa. So Nama of the mantra and Rupa of the mantra, when they come together, then the effect will be double, and the result will be that you will be able to uh, have some control over the chitta. So that's why they say it is the dominant note of our, it should be a dominant note of our life. This repetition of the mantra, it will, whenever we are in trouble, it is some stable ground where we can go and take some rest, and then again get ready for the battle, because we can't be always living unless one has given up the world. He just can't say that I'll repeat only God's name like Thakur did. He didn't care. But the uh, the stable ground when he needs it, when everything around him is shifting, when as it were the ground under his foot is being withdrawn, and then suddenly he realizes, oh, I have nothing to stand upon. The people whom I believed, the situation, the institution, and all those things whom we relied upon foolishly, they seem to be simply vanishing. There's no consistency. There's so much of contradiction in life. So Swamiji says, to remove that Maya, you should have faith in the Nama and faith in the meaning, the Rupa. So it becomes very easy if you have a Ishta who was a human being and who is still a human being for us. Because that is how we can remember. Thakur, who assumed the form of a human being, came, and we can even imagine that that same Thakur is alive in a subtle way. And every time I remember the mantra, either I see his form, or I meditate on his lila, or meditate on his qualities, or meditate on his compassion for the rest of our life, this should be the basis of our efforts to create some stability in the chitta. So the what gives us instability is the samskaras. Swamiji says the vibrations which are going haywire in our chitta, and with that chitta we try to meditate, and we try to, but our buddhi, the light of buddhi, which is a result of constantly meditating on the name and form, name, sometimes only name, sometimes only form, but as far as possible, repetition of the name and meditating on its meaning, that is form, the form of the mantra. So if we have a form, it is good. If we don't have a form, even the meaning is enough. So if we do that, then you will find this japa, or this repetition can become a very powerful sadhana. So here Patanjali, though he believes more in meditation and more in a very rational religion, but still he introduces the concept of Ishvara. That is how Indian tradition is. This is the traditional way of handling our mind and handling our problems. So I'll take your leave now. We have almost come to the end. If there are one or two questions, I'll see the chat. Yeah. Is buddhi equal to viveka? That is the first question. Buddhi, one of the qualities of buddhi is viveka. Viveka is one thing which is a result of a developed buddhi. Buddhi is not viveka. That is why they say viveka buddhi. So buddhi can be many things. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. In Gita, that buddhi doesn't mean viveka. After having discriminated, holding on to one particular theme and not changing, not being fickle minded, is also known as buddhi. So buddhi has many aspects. Viveka is one aspect. After discrimination, what? I discriminate that eating this is bad, eating this is good, but do I follow it? If I follow it and stick to what Viveka tells me, then it is buddhi. So buddhi is a very vast concept. It is a tool which will help us remove the darkness of ignorance. One. Second question is, when use the word good, bad companies, good and bad company, okay. Can you hear me? Yes. The question asked here is, I'll just finish with this. The question is, when good and bad company, evil company and good company are used, do these include different people, different gross and material, different images of God? Only should try to keep the holy company. What does it mean? Good and holy company is not about God at all. No God is evil company. Different gods, there's no problem at all. There may be lesser gods and lesser deities, and but if you consider even a stone as a deity, so that is good company. When you say Om, even if you don't have, so there is no question of different aspects of God and all. But different people, of course, it means different people, evil-minded people. You can easily know who is good company and who is bad company. That doesn't require any intelligence. If anybody is taking you more and more towards bondage and gross, is bad company. However rich or however nice looking he may be, good looking he may be, but if any person takes you away from the spirit, away from God, it is bad company. So good and evil, Swamiji has defined in a very simple way. Anything that takes you towards God is good. Anything that takes you away from the spirit or away from God makes you more material. Definitely, gross is always bad, because gross has an end and it will give rise to sorrow. The more we depend on the gross, the more sorrow in our life. The more we depend on the subtle, the higher we go, the more sattvic our mind becomes. So that is what good company means. Try to keep good company by associating with people who take you away from the gross and take you towards the subtle. That is in brief, to decide, to discriminate between good and bad. That is a general rule. So you have to think and find out in which category the people who associate with us fall, and then you have to decide. So there are no general rules for that. Only thing is, anybody who takes you towards God or towards the spirit will be solving your problems of our life in a much permanent way than others who might temporarily give you, their company also may be needed, but we have to know it for certain that their help will always be temporary. Ultimately, it is God alone who is the ultimate security. Otherwise, we won't call him God. Okay. And the last one is, could you explain more on Rupa, meditating on the meaning? Rupa, in the sense, meditate on the meaning for a person who believes in a personal God. Rupa can mean the shape or the figure. Say Sri Ramakrishna has a particular form, but that is not the whole of Rupa. His Rupa also consists of qualities like compassionate. If you see the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, you won't think of him as an angry person. You will see him as a person who has reached a state of samadhi. So for that, you have to understand, read his life. If you just take a picture, what will you know about Sri Ramakrishna? That's why Swamiji said, the more I think about Sri Ramakrishna, more I meditate on Sri Ramakrishna, he is like an infinite ocean, infinitely deep and infinitely vast. So we can't reach a limit, but we have to keep on trying to meditate on the real meaning of what Ramakrishna is, or Krishna is, or Brahman is, anything which you think as ultimate. The infinite aspect which finally culminates in the best possible definition of God, that is Sat, Chit and Ananda, that which gives me eternal existence, eternal consciousness and eternal bliss, not temporary consciousness, temporary bliss. We don't want that. No human being will be satisfied with the little. He wants infinite life. Why should he live for 100 years? Though he may have a target of 100 years, but when he nears 90, he still feels, oh, I have to die now, I have to go. So temporary will never satisfy us. So gross will never satisfy us. So infinite existence, that means only the spirit is infinitely eternally existent. Eternal existence, eternal consciousness, consciousness which will not go even after death. It remains, that awareness that I am, that is the infinite consciousness which can never be destroyed, because that is the concept of Brahman. And then finally the joy, the eternal bliss which the rishis found when they touched this infinite consciousness and infinite existence. Okay. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Tomorrow there is Gita class as usual, not gospel, Gita class at 5:45.
Thank you, Swamiji.